I never told my husband I owned the company he works for as CEO, but as I watched him slide his hand onto his assistant's knee under the dinner table, I realized I wouldn't just be firing him, I'd be erasing him. Nobody at this expensive, candlelit table knew who I really was, least of all the man wearing the $5,000 suit I technically paid for. Is it a lie if the truth would destroy a person's pride, or is it a mercy? Liam is a man built on the image of success, but that image is a house of cards I built for him. For 5 years, I let him believe he was the visionary while I pulled every string from the shadows. Would you let your partner believe they were a giant if it kept your home peaceful? Or is a marriage built on a hidden power dynamic already dead? Especially when that giant is currently cheating on you with the woman sitting to his left? My mother-in-law, Elaine, adjusted her pearls and looked at me with that familiar, stinging pity. "It must be so quiet for you at the library, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Liam was just telling us how he personally negotiated the Peterson merger. It sounds so exhausting. Real work always is." I caught Liam's eye. He didn't flinch. He didn't tell them I was the one who spent 6 months finding the fraud that forced that merger. He just squeezed the hand of his assistant, Chloe, who was luckily invited to this private family dinner. "It was a grind, Mom," Liam added, leaning back and radiating a fake confidence that made my skin crawl. "But the board of directors, especially the mysterious Miss V, who owns the majority share, they expect results. I had to show them who was boss." Chloe giggled, a high, irritating sound that echoed in the quiet restaurant. She looked at Liam with adoration, a look I realized was bought and paid for by my own company's dividends. Richard, Liam's father, cleared his throat, his face turning a deep shade of serious. "Speaking of Miss V, Liam, there's a rumor circulating. They say she's attending the gala tomorrow night, in person, for the first time in 10 years. Liam's face went bone white. The knife on the edge of his plate slipped, clattering loudly against the china. He looked at me, then at Chloe, his eyes wide with a genuine terror. He knew if the real owner showed up, his charade and his secret life with Chloe was over. "You look pale, honey," I whispered, reaching over to steady his hand. "Is something wrong with Miss V coming?" Liam forced a smile, but sweat was visible under the harsh chandelier light. No, just she's unpredictable. Nobody has seen her face. She's a ghost." He didn't realize the ghost was currently cutting a piece of sea bass 3 inches away from him. Chloe reached out and touched his arm, a comforting gesture that was a blatant violation of the boundaries she thought I was too simple to notice. Elaine leaned in, her eyes gleaming with the kind of gossip that usually destroyed lives. "I heard she's a recluse because she's hiding a scandal. Or maybe she's just old and bitter. Probably some woman who couldn't find a man to lead for her." I smiled into my wine. "Maybe she just likes to see people for who they really are when they think nobody important is watching," I suggested. The table went silent. Richard narrowed his eyes at me, sensing a sharpness he wasn't used to from the librarian. "That's a cynical way to look at it, Sarah," Richard remarked, his tone patronizing. "Business is about power, not hiding in the shadows." Liam tried to steer the conversation back to his bravery during the last fiscal crisis. He started describing a meeting with the CFO that never happened, a meeting I had actually held while he was supposedly at a golf retreat with Chloe. He was inventing a history of competence to impress a father who already looked at him like a king. Liam's phone was sitting face up near Chloe's hand. We all saw the notification. Liam lunged for the phone, but his elbow caught his water glass, sending it shattering across the table. In the chaos of the spill, he fumbled the device and it slid right toward his father. Richard picked it up, his brow furrowing as he looked at the screen. The room felt smaller. Liam looked at me, then the phone, the color draining from his lips as his father stared at the notification. Richard handed the phone back to Liam, his expression unreadable. You should keep your business private, son, even from your assistants. Liam laughed nervously, tucking the phone away, but I saw his hands shaking. He thought the detective was working for the board. He had no idea the detective was working for me. He had no idea that the Photos Ready notification contained 42 high-resolution images of him and Chloe in the penthouse suite I bought for company guests. Anyway, Liam said, his voice an octave higher than usual, Miss V is just a name on a piece of paper. I'm the one who makes the decisions at Apex Corp. I'm the one who provides for this family. He looked at me with a sudden, sharp arrogance, and Sarah knows that. She's happy with her books and her garden, right, honey? He was trying to put me back in my box, to assert dominance because he felt the walls closing in. I didn't answer immediately. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. Actually, Liam, I've been thinking about the company a lot lately, especially the expense reports. Did you know the penthouse has been used 30 times in the last 2 months? That seems excessive for business guests. Chloe's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Liam's eyes turned into pinpricks of pure panic. "What are you talking about, Liam?" snapped his voice, turning aggressive. "You don't know anything about company expenses." I leaned forward, placing the USB drive directly in the center of the table under the spotlight of the chandelier. "I know enough to know that you've been spending Miss V's money on things that aren't business, Liam, and I think your parents deserve to see exactly what hard work looks like." Richard reached for the drive, his face a mask of stone. "Don't touch that, Dad," Liam shouted, his chair flying backward as he stood up. The restaurant patrons turned to stare. The polished image of the perfect CEO was cracking. Sarah is just confused. She's been stressed. He looked at me, his eyes full of a desperate, ugly threat. "Give me that drive, Sarah. Now." He reached across the table, his hand gripping my wrist with a force that would have made the old Sarah flinch. I didn't flinch. I twisted my arm out of his grip. "I'm not confused, Liam, and I'm not stressed. I'm the owner." I turned to Chloe, who was trying to shrink into her seat. "And you're fired, effective 10 minutes ago when I sent the email to HR." The table went silent. Elaine gasped, clutching her throat. Liam looked like he wanted to lunge across the table, but he was paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what I was saying. "You're the owner?" Liam let out a harsh, jagged laugh. "You're a librarian. You don't have a penny that I didn't give you." I pulled a legal document from my bag, the original Articles of Incorporation for Apex Corp. I slid it across the stained tablecloth. "Look at the signature on the bottom, Liam. It's not Miss V. It's Sarah Vanessa Montgomery, my maiden name. The name you told me was too old-fashioned to keep." Liam's father read the document, his hands trembling. He looked at his son with a mixture of disgust and horror. Liam didn't see him. He was staring at the men approaching the table. "What is this?" Liam whispered, his voice breaking. "Sarah, what are you doing?" The lead lawyer, a man Liam had spent 3 years trying to impress, stepped forward and handed Liam a thick red folder. "You've been served, Mr. Davis, for embezzlement, breach of contract, and divorce." "Embezzlement?" Richard roared, standing up to face his son. "Liam, tell me this is a lie." Liam couldn't speak. He looked at Chloe, but she was already grabbing her purse, looking for an exit. She wasn't a partner, she was a passenger, and the ship was sinking. I stood up, smoothing my dress. "He's been funneling money into a private account in the Cayman Islands, Richard. Money meant for the employee's pension fund. He thought Miss V wouldn't notice because he thought Miss V was an old woman who didn't understand computers." Liam grabbed my arm again, his face twisted in a mask of rage. "You can't do this. I made this company. You were just a shadow." I leaned in, my voice a cold, sharp blade. "I am the shadow, Liam. And the thing about shadows is that they control the light. You are nothing but a suit I bought, and tonight I'm taking the suit back." I looked at his parents. I'm sorry dinner was cut short, but I have a company to save from the mess your son made. Richard looked at the USB drive on the table. Is the evidence on here? I nodded. Everything. The photos of him and Chloe, the bank transfers, the recordings of him laughing about how stupid his wife was for believing he was working late. Richard didn't hesitate. He took the drive and put it in his pocket. I'll handle the family side of this, Sarah. I am so deeply ashamed. He looked at Liam as if he were a stranger. Get out of my sight. I'm not going anywhere, he hissed. The house is in my name. The cars are in my name. You might own the company, Sarah, but I own your life. He smirked, a final, pathetic attempt to regain control. See you at home. He turned to walk away. But I didn't move. I just watched him go. I waited until he reached the door before I spoke. The locks were changed at 7 p.m., Liam. I called out across the silent restaurant. He stopped dead, his hand still frozen in midair as he reached for the door handle. Every head in the room turned. The waiters stopped mid-stride. And the cars, they were leased through the company. I reported them stolen 5 minutes ago. There's a police cruiser waiting for that specific model in the parking lot. Liam's bravado vanished instantly. He looked through the glass doors of the restaurant. The blue and red lights were already flashing, reflecting off the polished glass like a warning he had ignored for years. Liam turned back to me, his eyes pleading now, wide and wet. Sarah, please, we can talk about this. I was confused. Chloe, she meant nothing. She was just a distraction. Chloe, who was halfway out the door, stopped and looked at him with pure, unadulterated hatred. A distraction? She shrieked, her voice cracking the sophisticated silence of the room. You told me you loved me. You told me she was a leech who didn't understand your brilliance. The two of them began arguing in the middle of the restaurant, a pathetic display of two scavengers fighting over a bone that had turned into dust. I sat back down and finished my wine. My hand didn't shake. I looked at Elaine, who was still frozen in shock, her mouth slightly open. The fish was excellent, Elaine. We should do this again sometime, maybe when you've processed that your visionary son is actually a common thief. Richard sat back down too, his head in his hands. He knew his son was headed for a prison cell. He looked at me, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw respect in his eyes, and a deep, crushing fear. As the police stepped inside, the lead officer didn't head for the kitchen or the bar. He walked straight to our table. He looked at me, then at the man in handcuffs. Mrs. Davis? He asked. I nodded. He's all yours, officer. He's also carrying a company-issued laptop that contains encrypted files belonging to Montgomery Holdings. I'd suggest you secure that first. Liam let out a scream of pure rage as they hauled him toward the exit, his expensive shoes dragging across the carpet he thought he owned. I didn't follow them out. I stayed. I watched through the window as they shoved Liam into the back of the cruiser. I watched Chloe try to talk her way out of a secondary questioning, only for Marcus, my security lead, to hand the police a folder detailing her involvement in the Cayman transfers. She wasn't just a mistress, she was his accomplice. They had been planning to drain the remaining 10% of the liquid assets by Monday morning. I had caught them with only hours to spare. Richard looked at the red folder the lawyer had left behind. How long, Sarah? He whispered. How long have you known he was stealing? I leaned in, my voice dropping to a cold, steady level. I knew about the money 6 months ago. I knew about Chloe 3 months ago. But I wanted to see how far he would go. I wanted to see if there was any part of the man I married left inside that suit. I paused, looking at the empty chair where Liam had sat. There wasn't. He didn't just steal from the company, Richard. He stole the last 5 years of my life. Elaine finally found her voice, though it was weak and reedy. You're a monster, Sarah. To do this in public? To humiliate your husband like this? I stood up, grabbing my clutch. No, Elaine. A monster is a man who robs his employees' retirement funds to buy a penthouse for his mistress. I'm just the woman who balanced the books. I signaled to Marcus. Make sure the bill for this dinner is charged to Liam's personal credit card, the one that's about to be declined. As I walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air hit my face. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. I walked past the crowd of onlookers, past the flashing lights, and straight to the black sedan waiting at the curb. But as I opened the door, a hand caught the frame. It was Richard. He looked breathless, his face pale under the streetlights. "He's my son, Sarah. Please, if you go through with the embezzlement charges, he'll never see the sun again." I looked at him, and for a second, I felt a flicker of the old Sarah. Then I remembered the spreadsheet of the pension fund. "Then I suggest you get him a very good lawyer, Richard. He's going to need one." I got in the car and told the driver to head to the office, not the library, the top floor of the Montgomery building. When we arrived, the lobby was empty, but the lights on the 50th floor were blazing. My legal team was already there, purging the servers and changing the digital access codes. As I stepped out of the elevator, the staff, people who had only ever known me as the boss's wife, stood in the hallway. They weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at me with absolute, terrifying realization. I walked into Liam's office. My office, the one with the panoramic view of the city. I walked over to the mahogany desk and saw a framed photo of us from our honeymoon. I didn't break it. I didn't throw it. I simply picked it up and placed it face down in the bottom drawer. Then I sat in the chair. It was still warm from where he had been sitting earlier that afternoon, probably planning his next big move with Chloe. Marcus walked in, holding a tablet. "We found the secondary server, ma'am. He wasn't just stealing from the pensions, he was selling trade secrets to our biggest competitor, Sterling Tech. He was going to sink the company after he got his payout." My blood grew cold. He wasn't just a thief, he was a saboteur. He was willing to put 3,000 people out of work just to make sure he had enough for a yacht in the Mediterranean. "Does he know we found the Sterling files?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "No, he thinks those are hidden behind a triple-layer firewall." I looked at the screen. I had a choice. I could hand this to the FBI and ensure he spent 20 years in federal prison, or I could use it as leverage to make him sign over every single asset he had left, including the family estate his parents loved so much. I decided I didn't want the house. I wanted him to have nothing, not even a memory of success. I picked up the phone and dialed the private line for the district attorney. "I have the Sterling files," I said, my voice as cold as the glass of the window. "I want the full weight of the law on this one. No plea deals, no leniency." I hung up and looked out at the city. The lights felt brighter now. The ghost was finally in control, and for the first time, she didn't have to hide. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you won, Sarah? Check the safe in the floor of the bedroom, the one you didn't know about. I didn't just take the money. I took the one thing you can't replace." My heart skipped a beat. The bedroom safe? I didn't even know there was a safe in the floor. I stood up, my chair hitting the wall. I drove to the house I had supposedly been locked out of. My security team met me there, the new keys already in their hands. We went straight to the master bedroom. We tore back the rug. There it was, a small, reinforced safe embedded in the hardwood. It took the locksmith 20 minutes to drill through. When the door finally popped open, my breath hitched. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. Inside the safe was a single file, a birth certificate. My name was on it as the mother, but the father's name wasn't Liam's. It was a name I hadn't seen in 20 years, a name that belonged to the man who had actually helped me start the company, the man Liam told me had died in a car accident before we even met, the man Liam had convinced me to forget. I realized then that Liam hadn't just stolen my company. He had built our entire marriage on a lie about my past. He had isolated me, told me my family was gone, and manipulated my grief to make me dependent on him while I did all the work. He didn't just want my money, he wanted my soul. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I collapsed onto the bed, the paper fluttering to the floor. I looked at the date on the certificate. The man, the real father of the child I thought I had lost in that accident, was still alive. Liam had intercepted the letters. He had paid off the doctors. He had created a fake reality for me to live in while he reaped the rewards of my labor. My revenge wasn't finished. It was only just beginning. I stood up, wiping the tears from my eyes. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt dangerous. I picked up the phone and called Marcus. "Find him," I said. "Find the man on this certificate and tell the DA I'm adding kidnapping and fraud to the list of charges against Liam Davis." I walked out of the bedroom, leaving the past behind me. Liam is in a holding cell tonight, realizing that the simple woman he cheated on was the only thing keeping him relevant. I could have stayed in the shadows. I could have divorced him quietly. But would that have been justice? Did I destroy a man, or did I finally allow a parasite to face the cold air of reality? He thought he was the architect of my life, but he was just a squatter in a house I built. Now he's lost the company, his family, and his freedom. But I have found the truth. Is revenge ever really enough when you realize your entire life was a scripted lie? Or is the only real victory moving on to a life he can no longer touch? Let us know in the comments.